The narrative of the trailers I researched were all set in an equilibrium structure. I found that using Todorov's theory of equilibrium was a conventional approach into the structure of a trailer. I found this convention of Todorov's theory by looking at other films of the narrative of the film, and I wanted to create an enigma. The start of my trailer had to include a state of equilibrium, and my introduction to the main characters had done this by explaining what his intentions are. Further along the trailer, the disruption of that order had to be identified. I did this by the character explaining how he's in on the other boy's plan. When things got out of hand and the police turned up, this meant the main character backing out of the plan. This created a recognition that the disorder has occurred. Looking at how trailers ended, it created an enigma. Creating an enigma, I found, was conventional in order to create question points and get the viewer interested in watching the film. Otherwise, there would be no need to go and watch the film. I used this by the last clip ending with the boy running. Where he's running to, who he's running from, and why he's running are question points I created from using an enigma to engage the viewers, like these other film trailers also did. I found the representation of people in socio-realism films were negative. Teenagers were made to look like criminals. Young teenagers were the age group I found conventional to use in order to attract the target market of my film. My target market was the same as the films I'd analysed, including Shank and Kidhood, with a similar age group, and therefore I used the same in order for my target market to engage with the film. Both black and white ethnicities were commonly used in the genre and represented them as violent. I needed to do this and use the convention of using these types of characters. As I had gathered, characters displayed in these films were mostly of a black and white ethnicity. My research told me that the one stereotype of this race was being violent. In order for my film to create a negative image of the youth, I decided to use this convention. I did this in order to make the representation of these characters clear. However, I had developed on this convention and used an Asian as one of the main characters. I did this in order for my film to attract a wider target market. Early in the trailer, the Asian boy is seen as one of the villains. However, he's then seen as the victim. So you could say I've also made the representation of Asians to look weak. Mise-en-scène, including the clothing of the characters, included hats and hoodies. This was a convention that I found worked effective in portraying the characters as violent. Therefore, I used this convention for the teenage characters to portray the same. Across the range of films, I saw men were dominant to women in being strong. I used this convention and hadn't included any female characters that play a big role or are seen as violent like the male characters. In order for my trailer to connote the genre of my film, social realism, I needed to include the typical conventions of the film genre. Known as semantic iconography, I had to include this. Like representation, I found the mise-en-scène was important in connoting the genre. Looking at film trailers across social realism, I found characters' clothing were important in connoting the genre. Hoodies and hats were props that gave the stereotype that they were troublemakers. This was a convention that made the genre of the film obvious. So I thought this was essential to include in signifying the genre. Therefore, throughout my trailer, I dressed the characters in this similar clothing. Language used also expressed the genre of the film. During my research, I found bruv, which is commonly known as slang. I found from my research of the trailers that smoking and drugs were commonly used and could be associated with social realism, and especially the age group I was targeting. Films like Kidhood use this in their trailer and was a conventional approach to connoting negativity towards teenagers, and therefore it also suggested the genre. I thought this was a good way in further connoting the genre, so I used this convention. During my research, I increased my knowledge of different shot types and how it helped with a particular scene. A long shot, for instance, was what was used to establish the location of the film. I found an establishing shot was conventional in showing the audience the location of the film, and my knowledge from the camera shots research helped me use this convention. Not just one, but a number of locations within the film were used in order to familiarize the scenes with the audience. My two establishing shots included an estate and city skyline, both urban areas which I found were important in connoting social realism. This was important for me to include as it was the first shots of my trailer. I found when an important scene had occurred, a close-up was a shot frequently used to emphasize the shot. I used this conventional shot type at an important time in the trailer where the three boys agreed on their plan. This allowed the pace of the trailer to increase and showed its importance to the trailer. Conversations with one another had to be shot using an over-the-shoulder shot. I found this was the conventional way in filming a conversation. From my research, it helped me understand this shot, and I used this shot when a conversation took place. From my analysis of social realism trailers, I found sound was an important convention. When looking at the trailers, I found it was important to use the right sound in order to create the right mood of the trailer. A fast and upbeat soundtrack was what I found conventional when looking at all trailers in my research. I used this convention in order to build attention to my film. Shank, Kidulthood and Sket are some examples that had used this. However, like these trailers had used upbeat music, I also included a slow pace of music in the start of my trailer in order to create the right mood of the character. It was an important convention, and the structure of my trailer needed this in order for the narrative to be clear. Looking at trailers, I found captions were important in giving further information about the film. Institutional companies I found were important as they were always displayed at the very start of the trailer. I used this convention and revealed my institutional information, including Revolver Entertainment and Gunslinger, at the start of my trailer. I did this in order for the audience to be aware of these companies involved with the film. Other captions on the trailer I saw were the star actors' names. I found this was a conventional approach these trailers use, and I decided to use this convention as a marketing strategy. I gathered from my research that people were most appealed to a film trailer by the cast, so I thought this was necessary to include. As mentioned earlier, awards films had won weren't commonly displayed due to the fact all films hadn't won awards. I found that this was a USP and a good marketing strategy. Green Street had taken advantage of this and used this in their trailer, and I decided to do the same. Screening the tagline of the film was another convention I had used. All the film trailers I looked at had used this, and I had used this in order for the tagline to create an impact on the viewer. This included an enigma. This worked particularly well as the tagline was also mentioned by one of the characters. This was another conventional approach I took in order for the tagline to be familiar with the audience. Towards the end of the trailer, the title of the film, release date, and finally the billing block were the conventional sequence I found to the end of a trailer. I decided to use this and end my trailer in the same sequence. I did this as I thought it was effective in giving vital information to an audience.